Present.
And we're ready to go when you are, because it is
We're
time.
ready to go. Sweet. Awesome. Let me see if I can actually show grid. Oh, okay. Ah, that's better. Now I can actually see who's in here.
Yes.
Yay. Awesome. Okay. So, hi. So the bit.ly is up at the top if you guys are interested in having it. So it is case sensitive, but it's all lowercase. So it's just OCQ and SCI for science. I'm Ann Rizzacasa. I am a science teacher. And I'm just kind of sharing I mean, we have a small crowd, so thank you for being here, one. And we're just, I mean, let's have a conversation, right? And so I'll share with you guys what I have been doing with the pandemic, but by no means it's like the expert thing or anything like that, you know? And my Twitter is Ann Rizzy. So Ann with an E and Rizzy with a Y. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about today? I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction and then what my process is, some examples that I have done so far, and then we can workshop things, or we could just do Q&A, like whatever the room would like to do. I am totally open to. I love sharing creative ideas for sure, and so I am happy to do so. Okay, so online learning, oh my gosh, like what was this, like a year ago now, that it's like, what, I have to stay at home and teach and still try to get to all of my students. Like, how can I assess my students? How can I know that they are actually learning, that I feel comfortable with? I know truly what they know, right? And so my thought process is like, let's just throw out multiple choice like out the window. Like, we already, like, they're just going to be putting everything straight into the Google search bar if we do multiple choice, and let's make some projects. And so I don't do there's the phrase of like the project-based learning. I do project-based assessments, right? And so I'm assessing them based upon a project, right? Are they learning during that process? Of course they're learning too, right? But of course I do where they are scaffolded first with all the information, and then their assessments is that ending project. And so far the results have been a lot better than I thought it could be. Like, it could have been a crash and burn, but it actually wasn't. And so that is super cool. So what is my process? Of course, first step is always, and I have it literally right here next to me, is my binder of standards, right? So it's my NGSS standards are literally right there, and be like, wait, how was that standard set again? Because it doesn't matter how many times I look at those standards, I could translate them a bajillion different ways. And so I always try to keep my standard in mind. I try to keep the goal in mind. I try not to overwhelm myself with too many of the standards, even though we are pressured to like cover them all, like type of deal. But it's like, okay, how can I just really cover this one really well? And then I have, more than anything, my pet like little project of researching right now is that looking at the science practices and looking at the engineering practices, and thinking about the do, like what do we want the students to do versus what do we want them to know. And so focusing on that do really helps me figure out like, how do I actually want to frame their projects. And then my best like resource for inspiration, and that I've been using a lot, are, oh my gosh, these NSTA books are just like the best thing ever. And so if you want to, I'm not paid by them or anything like that, but they're just best. So if you want to click on my beanbag face, it will take you to the NSTA bookstore as well. And you can see, depending upon what subjects you guys are, what subjects and grade levels, they have everything. NSTA stands for the National Science Teachers Association, and it's super awesome. And so, and then, oh, the last step, of course, is that, okay, I have this project. What happens when I Google it, right? So I think like a student and like, okay, let me Google it and see what comes up, right? And if there's no answers, sweet, I'm on the right track. because essentially I don't want them to be able to Google the right answer. I want the right answer to come from their brain. And so that's that. And then I also know can kind of troubleshoot, right? Because if I know what happens in the Google search, I'm like, oh, so you are actually looking at this, but FYI, we need to reframe our thinking, right? Okay, so why do I assess this way? I assess this way because multiple choice is just not as effective. Is it good for, I totally like, I'm not downplaying the multiple choice, right? Which my colleagues call multiple guess at this point. But quizzes, of course, is a good, like, it's a good quick check, but it's not, there's just too much cheating that can be going on, right? So it's not only cheating from other sources, right, that they can, if they, even if we lock down their computers, of course they have their phones, they have their mom, their dad, their, you know, all the different sources. And so I really liked and then it becomes a measurement of how many sources do they have, right? Do they have good research skills? I want to know if they know that information, right? And so I feel like this is a more authentic measurement of learning. It is also pretty low risk for them because because they're projects, I give them feedback, which, by the way, go back to that one feedback, the lesson that I never taught session was amazing for feedback and all that stuff. Oh no, there was another, I forget what the other one. There was another one that's talking about moat for feedback, and it was super awesome. So totally recommend doing that. But it gives them low risk because they're just putting their creative energy out there. And so I feel like I get a high cognitive output without like the stress of like, oh, do I know this answer? Do I know this nitty gritty detail? That's not where I want my focus to be for my students at this point, you know? And then of course, they get that feedback, they get their feedback, and then they're like, okay, I can revise this, I can make it better, I can change my thinking, right? And so that has been a really cool process as well. So that was me, a lot of me talking, and I like to hear from you guys. So in the chat, or you can unmute and stuff. How have you been assessing your students during the pandemic? And do you think that your experience teaching in the pandemic will influence your teaching after you get back into the classroom? And then how do I see the chat?
There should be a little chat button next to the left of the
I just see everyone's screens.
okay.
Thumbnail video? Oh, no, that's not it.
Let me chat and
Active speaker video? No.
If you go up to the top in the right, there's like view. And if you click on that, it gives you like different ways to view things. And then at the bottom, there should be a chat. At the very bottom of your screen, there should be a chat, and it should pop up on the right-hand side.
Chat. There we go. Oh, cool. Sorry, I am not a Zoomer. I knew Zoom during the summer, and then they updated it on me, and I
no
just
problem.
not as
I've been struggling with the teaching of science during the pandemic because we don't have the materials, and we're moving towards like all this hands-on stuff. And like for the
right.
heat transfer unit required like boiling water. Well, I'm not going to suggest that a kid boil water while their parents are not home. Like there's just all sorts of liability, I think. So I've been using a lot of Nearpod and simulation, like the PhET simulations. So as far as assessment goes, it's oftentimes more formative assessment. And the fact that they can explain it well, either on a flip grid or in a written statement. So that's kind of what we've been doing a little bit more of. It's kind of more that authentic assessment, I suppose. So
Definitely. Awesome. I mean, the whole bag of like all the stuff, I was like, oh, what, like, how do I now transfer this into like with my students? Like, and so I was like thinking, if I give them a list ahead of time, could I get them to do the same thing? Like maybe, Because my students, we don't have a monthly pickup or anything like that.
Well, you could just have them get 5 objects from around the house that they like recyclable objects. Give them like give them a week to collect 5 things, so that everyone can be taken care of, and then give them either like the same prompt or something like that, that they're all creating would be one way to do that. Um, I I wanted those to me, that was just like a fun icebreaker, like, ooh, we get a STEM kit, our first pickup. But I think for subsequent ones, there would be like almost that single point rubric or the look fors, like, did you do this, this, and this? So, and mostly it would be in their explanation, not like what they built. It doesn't matter really what they built, it's how they explain it. In your explanation, you need to use these 3 content vocabulary words or whatever it may be. So
Very cool. Yeah. Oh, yeah. My brain's buzzing from all this stuff. Okay. Anyone else wanted to chat before I keep going?
a lot of people, it looks like in the
we
chat,
got
we're using the
Oh, yeah.
Jamboard to model phenomena. And yeah, nice.
Yeah, I found that like super helpful. Like I put them into groups and I have them at the end of the unit model the main phenomenon we've been talking about. And it seems like I get more out of them discussing it rather than trying to do it individually on their own.
Definitely. They like being in groups for the most part, as long as everyone participates. If one student doesn't participate, they get really upset about it.
Or you're the only one wanting to participate and the rest of the group has their cameras off and muted, which is common in some of the rooms. So I had to like mix it up a different way this year. I asked them like, who are 2 people you can work with? So that I could put them into the groups to work with them.
For sure. I unfortunately, like, I have freshmen, so they all like don't know each other. Yeah. Whew, it's tough, but cool. Okay, let's, so I'm sure you guys are like, okay, cool, awesome. We know all this already. What did you do? So let me share with you guys. The first one was a photosynthesis lab where, and all of the links on there pretty much have forced you into making a copy. And so then you have all the templates and everything. And of course you can edit it and take it away and all that stuff. But of course you have pictures of my house along with the plants, but it's so good. So it's pretty much, so I had of course the title slide, which is boring. And then I had them do the classic CER introduction. And then I had them label the parts, which of course that's a Googleable thing, but then typing it in was a reiteration, right, of the information that they already knew. And then from there, they can connect that to, and I have 3 different experiments that I did at my house. And so I put the data in there. So I gave them all the data. I gave them pictures. I had them do the observations. And so they got a little confused of which was which, but I tried to keep it like the ones with the same leaves are the same project. And then I have different types of data analysis. So one was about climate change. One was about the temperature of photosynthesis. And so I have all the probes going as if it was in my classroom, but of course they can't be in my classroom, right? And so I have all the pictures there and what it looked like during the different stages. Some of them start dying. My last one was a total little bit of a experimental fail in that the control died before the rest of them. And I was like, well, that was not a very good control, but oh, well, that's okay. And then the last one is the colors of photosynthesis. So they're all in different colors of bags and they're outside and growing at different levels too. And so they got all that information. And then I asked them, okay, can you apply this now? Which is where they struggled the most and where I saw whether they understood the information the most as well, right? Can they now explain at the molecular level? Because so they knew about the moleculars, they labeled it. Can they now explain what's happening in that experiment at the molecular level? And I wasn't expecting them to give me some college level information whatsoever, right? I'm just trying to see like, okay, can they apply what they know from regular photosynthesis now to the experiment? And a lot of them struggle with that. And that was where it was a really good conversation to have with them too. Like, what do you really think is happening in that chloroplast when it's a blue filter versus a red filter, right? And so we kind of talked about the different peaks and all that stuff. And so they had a prior lesson with that and all that stuff, right? Ooh, did I hear someone else? Is there a question? No? Okay. And then the conclusion, at first I gave them just write a conclusion of what you learned. And then once I started reading them, I was like, ooh, we need a little bit more structure to it. And so I gave them more structure to what I actually wanted in their conclusion. And then of course there's like all these slides, right, for all the other extra stuff that they could add in and make it theirs and all that stuff. And then, because some of that could be super like copied and pasted from the internet, then I had Flipgrid presentation for them to do. And if it clicks to the right thing, there we go. So I have all the links on a teeny Wakelet for you guys, but here's one example of one of my students' presentations that she gave me permission. And so she's talking about she's a very verbose student. So she's using all the terms, she's applying her knowledge, like, and it was super cool and super awesome to see them do this. How do I exit out of this now that I got myself into it? Oh, here we go. Okay, cool beans. Now I have two other examples so far. And then I'm working on my next one, right? So the other two were I asked the students, okay, because we don't have all the time in the world, right? We only have so much time. And I asked them, okay, what do you really want to learn about? Because I want their engagement, right? And that's the key, and I want them to learn. So I was like, okay, do we want to do, what was the other thing? Doing cellular respiration with yeast. And I had some yeast cars and stuff, and we could like race them. And they're like, no, Miss Rose, we're really interested in body systems. And I was like, okay, cool, we can do body systems. And so of course, part of the standard with body systems and be able to model and be able to go relate to homeostasis. Cool, awesome. Then we can do this. Here we go. And I took out all the student names, but they got into groups and they've already learned about, they've done a lab about racing and trying to make their heart as fast as possible. And so I asked them to relate now, and let me go back to, this is what I gave them. And they took away with it because they are super creative and love their colors, right? And so I asked them to create a homeostasis feedback loop of the heart rate lab, explain the process and identify the receptor, the control center, and the effector. And so I gave them different roles. And so I said, be fluid with the roles because the internet goes in and out for different people. And so we just want to be super flexible and work together as a group. And they're like, okay, Riz, we know. And so they have the different groups. So we have the recorder, the illustrator, the presenter, and the researcher. And so what they did is they made this flow chart. And then some of them have a link to actually present. And I think that was the part where they kind of like didn't quite get to. Here we go. One with person had a video of explaining their reasoning. But they're so awesome. And so of course I have a rubric that I graded them on, and I was like, oh, this is so much better than I thought it was going to turn out as. And so that was super awesome. But the one feedback the students did give me is, Miss Riz, like there's the 2 people that do all the work, and then there's the 4 people who do absolutely nothing, and which is probably half tech issues and half that they're actually not doing anything. And I said, okay, cool. And so I was like, let's do another one. But this time we did it on a single basis, and boy, the diversity of seeing the individual thoughts processes of this and modeling it Like they did some Googling for sure, but they also had to explain why it was that way. And so this person didn't do so great hot, right? But this one, super awesome, giving me strategies on how to even read it and interpret his thoughts. This one, of course, was a little, she was going crazy with the copying and pasting, right? So this is not necessarily ideal, but she had to explain it all. So, okay, the learning's still happening. The one that I like the best is actually that one student, you know, that has to be at the very end. Um, and she was explaining, okay, here's all the key terms, here's her own writing, and
Uh-oh, did Anne freeze? Or did I freeze? If anyone can hear me, can you put something in the chat so I know you can hear me?